Welcome to the 4 Habits podcast, where we help you build relationships that thrive at home, at work, and in life. We're Dr. Andrea and John Taylor-Cummings, and every week we bring you actionable insights to create meaningful connections and lasting success. So let's dive in.
So today we're looking forward to a great conversation about connection, even across things that traditionally could divide us. How do we build relationships on purpose through all of life's transitions? And we have the joy of being in conversation with Shari Leid. Shari, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. This is wonderful. I'm so excited to talk to the two of you and on my favorite topic, connection.
Well, there we go. But before we dive in, because we're going to do that in a minute, we have to give you your proper introduction. So John's going to take us through the bio.
Always my pleasure and privilege. All right, so Shari Leid is a former litigator turned certified life coach, best-selling author, and sought-after speaker helping people cultivate deep, authentic connection, especially during life's toughest transitions. So from divorce and parenting shifts to retirement and reinvention, Shari offers wisdom and tools that help friendships not just survive, but thrive. Through her groundbreaking 50 States project, and we're going to be talking about that in a moment, Shari shared meals with 50 women across the United States, conversations that crossed political, racial, and religious lines. The experience shaped her upcoming memoir, Table for 51, and again, we'll talk about that as well a bit, a heartfelt reflection on what it means to truly connect in a divided world. Also known for the Friendship series, Shari's practical insights have appeared on the Today Show, People, ABC, and Time. So whether she's coaching, writing, or speaking, she inspires us to show up fully for ourselves and one another. Because relationships aren't just something we have, they are something that we build.
Wow.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
that
I want
line
to hear that every
alone-
morning. Can you just read that to me every morning to get me inspired for the
That'll
day?
get you out of bed. Get you out of bed.
Well, everything resonates so strongly, and especially that last line is like our mantra. Or you don't just automatically have relationships; you have to build them on purpose. And we want to dive into all that you have to share about connection. I'm very ready to jump in, but I know there's a question you wanted to start with.
You kick it off. I've got plenty, but you kick it off.
Well, how did you get into this whole area of connection? And I really want to know, just give us a little bit of that story of the 50 women that you met across the world.
And it was so interestingly, I've traveled, luckily, internationally quite a bit before this project to travel the U.S. And I'm adopted, but I was raised in the United States, but had never traveled my country before. And I decided to do this, to go to every state in a year. And I wanted to make this personal. And what makes places personal? It's the people. So it wasn't just 50 women. It was 50 women that I either absolutely didn't know, strangers, or women that I had some contact with at some point in my life, but had lost contact with decades ago. So essentially strangers at that point. And these were women from the ages of 20s to 60s, all different races, economic levels, education levels, political beliefs, and religious beliefs. And we sat across tables, 50 tables at the end, and shared 50 meals and had 50 incredible conversations.
Who got to choose the food?
I always ask them to choose the food. And the only place we have out on the East Coast, I live on the West Coast of the US, but out on the East Coast in a state, Maine, they're known for their lobster. And I could be a little squeamish, but the woman there thought it'd be really smart for me to meet my dinner before I ate my dinner. So that was the only meal that was kind of like, oh, I could do this.
Lots of variety in there.
Eat your dinner before you eat your dinner.
Yes, yeah.
Now listen, this conversation about connection, especially across things that traditionally have divided us and sadly are dividing us even more now, is such an important conversation to have. What are the key things that you've discovered in all your 50 conversations? What are the key things to really build connection and have honest conversations, even about things that could divide?
Well, I recently reviewed again your TEDx talk, and I believe it's your number one habit of curiosity. Am I
Yeah.
correct in
Yeah,
that? Of
yeah, yeah.
curiosity. And this is what I noted even before seeing your TEDx. I was like, okay, I must be right because this is what they're saying too. And when I sat down with the women, some women, all conversations were good, but some just felt like we had been the best of friends for years. And I was trying to tap into what made those connections so much deeper so quickly. And it
Mhm.
was when we both approached the conversations with curiosity,
Mhm.
then the connection happened. So when we spoke to each other to learn as opposed to respond,
Yeah.
and you talk about this world of disconnection. That was one of the impetuses for this project was in addition to I've never traveled in the US before, through the pandemic, we became separated in our physical bubbles and got used to that. But
Yeah.
because of everything, it's not just the United States, but definitely the United States right now with all the political and racial divide, we also became separated mentally mentally and emotionally, where we started to look at somebody and said, oh, they live there, they look like this. There's no way we could sit down and have a simple meal with each other. So
Mhm.
that was the impetus for this project as well.
And so curiosity or going in to learn rather than to respond or defend your position was, I
Mhm.
can hear that loud and clear, the kind of number one thing that made it work. What else have you discovered is important for connection? And I know you've mentioned the challenges of staying connected with
Mhm.
people you have been connected with through life transitions as well, when divorce happens or parent shifts and so on. What are the other things that you found to be important to stay connected?
It like you said in the beginning, there's an intention. You have to be
Mhm.
intentional about it. There's nothing that beats FaceTime, but even there are buffers between that time that you can have FaceTime, phone calls, texts, just to check in. And the woman that I mentioned in Maine, actually, when we went down to meet my dinner, the thing that really stuck out to me is she walked through that town like she had been there forever. Everyone was saying hello to her. She was telling me the stories of this family, this family. So I asked her, how long have you lived here? And she said, 2 years.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I
Okay.
said, 2 years. I thought you lived here forever. And I asked her, what feels like home? And she said, everywhere. And the reason why everywhere felt like home to her, she explained, is because anywhere she goes, she doesn't sit back like many people do and wait for community to come find her. She goes out and creates community. And
Wow.
so, the lesson there is don't wait, create. So when we talk about connection, don't wait for connection to come find you, as I did for many years, actually, until this project that I realized, I had to go out and find it myself. Don't wait, create connection. And it pays off dividends. And people are so receptive. It's surprising. People are receptive to reaching out and going out for a cup of coffee or tea or a meal.
So the woman that you met, sorry, I'm kind of taking
Okay,
over
that's
the
okay.
questions here.
Yeah.
The woman that you met with, did you say that you had some kind of connection with
With
each of them in life,
some,
or were
no.
some of them complete strangers?
Some of them were complete strangers. So about 21, I got on my own, and it would be someone like maybe you. And let's just say, oh, I'm going to go to London to do this project. We met on this podcast, but never met in person. So I reached out and said, this is my project. Would
Mhm.
you like to meet? And then I reached out on social media and got 13 more states or so through that. People sent me their cousins, their nieces, their old college roommates. And then after that, I went on LinkedIn. I looked for women business owners because I figured, okay, there'd be less chance that they will stand me up if they're active in their business and their community. And even if they did, I know where to find them. So I got my list of 50 before I planned my travel. And
Mhm.
my only requirement was that they communicate well with me, so that we had communication up until the day we met.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. What a great mind opening approach to building relationships with people that you don't yet know. What is
Mhm.
it that you were alluding to when you talked about staying connected during life transitions, you know, through
Mm-hmm.
divorce and
Mm-hmm.
through, I think you mentioned parenting shifts. What's the
Mhm.
challenge there and how did you deal with it?
Well, actually, myself, I just ended a 27-year marriage, so I'm in a
Wow.
big life transition. So this is speaking from this is from coaching people and also actually experiencing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, well, especially as a woman, there's a theory. Well, you've heard of fight or flight, right? Your stress
Mm-hmm.
response. That study was done on men when it was originally developed, and there's another theory called tend and befriend, which is a study that has been that was on women, basically their stress
Uh-huh.
responses. And there's a question whether or not, is this nurture versus nature? As far as this response goes. But the theory is that as women in general, when we're under stress, we tend to our young or the people that we need to take care of first. And then we befriend, we grab our group together to protect us, to have
Mm-hmm.
this group of protection. And I find as far as connection goes, what I've learned under times of stress, I've reached out to my friends. I call them my picket fence friends, and they might be a different group for every thing. I formed 10 when I went through my divorce, said, hey, just check in with me. I might not always respond. And I think that's one of the keys too, is to tell people when you're going through a period of stress that what you need. And most of the times it's just, I just need you to check in and let them know I might not respond, but just check in with me and just let
Mm,
me know you're there. And I think on the flip side, that's what I now do with my friends when I find out they're going through, let's say, a health crisis or a divorce or some major stressor in life. I say, hey, I know you're going through a lot now. I'm just going to connect or just check in to let you know I'm still connected with you and think of you. No pressure for you to respond. You don't have to, take that on. But I think that's how you help stay connected during those times of stress.
yeah, because it's easy to just retreat into a shell or isolate yourself, or any other conversation to deal with can just feel so overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was going to go with the questioning. Actually, was around that. What are the lessons that you've learned from connecting with 50 people, 50 women across the
Hmm.
United States, as you say? Um, because those relationships are not in the nicest possible way. They're not deep relationships necessarily. It's not like
Hmm.
having a lifetime partner or having people around you. Are there any lessons that you learn from those making those connections that you think could then transfer across into having those relationships stick around for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, however long they happen to be, long-term
Yes.
relationships? What lessons there?
Yes, well, every long-term relationship starts with a first date or a first connection.
Yep.
So some of
Yep.
those 50 women I would consider a close friend at this point,
Hmm.
and we stay in regular contact. But also an interesting thing with that is I started doing Zoom calls with these women from across the US, and the only connection they had was me through this project. And I released the book in February of this year and invited all the women from the project to meet in New York for this book release. And everyone except those women were wearing black. Those women were wearing red. So some of them recognized each other from Zoom calls. Others just knew they were part of the project because they were wearing red, and they greeted each other as if they were the best of friends that night. But the big piece is I told them that at the end of this project, I was going to do a survey to find out what everyone's religious and political beliefs were, and I was going to share that survey. And I did do that survey, and then I decided not to share it with them. And I still haven't, and I don't believe I will. We'll see. And the reason why is I thought this is going to ruin everything.
Oh,
These
really?
women have connected, and there are women in that group that their paths absolutely would not have crossed if they had known what the other person voted for, or if they maybe economically they wouldn't have crossed, racially they wouldn't have crossed, because their communities are so separate from what they know. And when I was watching them at the book release, hugging like they were the best of friends, and I saw this person I knew was a single mom in an apartment versus this, woman who lived in a very fancy mansion, hugging each other, knowing that these two voted very differently than each other and just laughing with each other. I thought, okay, this is what it should. this is a human connection right
Yep.
here. This is what this is about. And even though these people voted differently, if you went down to it, I think you would look that they were fighting for the same thing or the same value. They were just, because of life circumstances, going about it a different way. But it helped me see the underlying values of people, I guess, with a little more grace and a little less judgment by this experience.
But those are two very powerful words, which is what I think is the challenge that we have in talking about those difficult or traditionally divisive topics, is that we do it with more judgment and less grace, and not have the human connection to really understand what's driving, what's the need, what's the legitimate need that's driving the way you're making decisions, or the way why you believe what you believe. Because if we understood the underlying drivers, we'd discover we have a lot more in common than we think we do. I want to ask a kind of, you don't have to answer, but I will ask a kind of deeper diving question. Now that you have understood more about connection, any reflections on where the connection broke, say, to lead to the divorce? Is that an okay question to ask?
Yeah, I'm an open book for better for worse, definitely. Yeah, I was thinking about this, especially thinking about this as I coming on to talk with the both of you, and having just watched your TEDx and loving the synergy that both of you have.
Oh, thank you.
Thinking about where our marriage broke down, and we got married when we were 27 years old, been together since we were 25, married for 27 years. And I honestly think that at some point we let good stop us from becoming great. We, our marriage was good, especially from the outside, it was good. And we stopped communicating. And communicating was huge. And we early on in our marriage, we fought, like argued a lot. And we got to a point, what? Yeah. And we got to a point though that we stopped arguing, but with that stop arguing, we didn't talk about things that were important.
Right. Okay.
And we just brushed it under, and we just went along with good. And so we went for, I would say, of the 27 years, probably a good 20 years of it was being good and keeping us from becoming great.
I hear you.
And so a lot of it, it got to the point at the end, we tried marriage counseling. The counselor said, your job this week, your homework is sit down, for my ex-husband and I, we're each supposed to just tell each other our day. I forgot if he started out with 20 minutes or something like that, just talk without interrupting. He saw my ex-husband look at him and he goes, okay, 15 minutes. He saw him look at him again. He said, okay, 10 minutes. He saw him look at him. He goes, 5 minutes. Do 5 minutes. Just tell Shari 5 minutes about your day and she won't interrupt you. We tried it once and he was able to talk for a minute and he didn't know what else to tell me about his day. He couldn't give me more than 1 minute. And this is not to knock on my ex-husband. This is to say this is where our communication level had come to, because at some level he must not have felt safe or he didn't know how to communicate with me. And I also, I bear responsibility there as well. So that's a long answer, but bottom line is we let good stop us from becoming great.
But you said some really, very significant things, good. It's okay. And as long as it's okay, you just keep plodding along, not realizing the emotional distance. But this idea of getting out of the habit of sharing your day and being totally open with your heart. So this like the way you would talk when you're dating or when you're with a friend, you just used to sharing your ideas and talking about whatever pops into your head. But the more distance that's created, sometimes just because you're not in the same physical space, or there is some emotional, we talk about emotional clutter between you that hasn't been addressed, you start having those thoughts in your head and not verbalizing it and get out of the habit of communication. I think that's a big deal now. I think a lot of people, because the world's so busy, I think we're all in danger of being stuck in good and processing everything in our heads. What do you think with your connection hat on?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I see it clear now from my own experience looking back, and especially when I think of what relationship I want to for moving forward and how I want to cultivate it as I move forward. And definitely, it's when you're so young in your 20s, especially, I got married. Well, a lot of us back in the time where we didn't have the internet, we didn't have
Yeah.
we were just thinking this is it. We get married, we have the big, beautiful wedding, and that was the destination and the journey
Yeah.
was done.
Yeah.
And I see it very differently now that this is, that's a party, but it's really about the journey and
Yeah.
staying connected. And it's hard, man. And especially because it's so easy to because your marriage feels somewhat safe usually. So it's like, okay, I need to prioritize these relationships because they're not as safe and I don't want them to leave. But man, he bought the ring. He's got to stay. So I don't need to talk to him.
Yeah.
It's going to take him a lot to move away. And so it makes it easy to neglect the person that we're supposed to be working the hardest, I think, in this journey and communicating with. And that's one lesson that I don't want to forget as I move forward into whatever relationship I happen on next.
Yeah.
Powerful.
I want to pick up the conversation, though, move in a slightly different direction. And actually, we've spoken about connection and I guess what can happen when you disconnect. But I want to move into the area of belonging because I had the joy of watching your TEDx talk and thoroughly enjoyed watching that. But in that, there were some lessons that you learned. And I know you shared when we first spoke that you went on a journey of discovery yourself, looking at belonging and, where did you belong and how did that fit in? Talk us through a little bit of that journey of belonging to where you started there and to where you ended up now. I guess you shared some of that in the TEDx talk, but just to bring that alive here, what does belonging mean to you now?
Yeah, so my TEDx talk and my keynote actually is called Flip the Box. My TEDx has a different title, but I talk about Flip the Box. And the reason where that comes from is I was orphaned in South Korea and I was found in a cardboard box in a parking lot with no identifying information. So I didn't have a name. Don't know my birth date, my actual birth date. It was given by the orphanage, no birthplace. And I learned about this beginning of I knew I was adopted, but I learned about that my birthday wasn't really mine when I was in high school. And that feeling of being disconnected followed me, talk about good, letting good instead of great. I look great from the outside world. I became an attorney, married, had 2 wonderful children. Everything looked great, but inside, up to much of my adult life, I still felt like that baby in a box, still very disconnected and like I didn't belong anywhere. And so this journey through the United States, I'd have conversations with these women that were very organic, like we're having today, with no set, questions. But what I found at the end is I realized I kept asking these women where feels like home, like I mentioned with the woman in Maine, Cameron, where feels like home? Does this feel like home? And I realized that was what I was really searching for in my travels was what feels like home, what feels like belonging. And what I've come to believe from talking to these women, the interesting thing, and the reason they were all women is because I was doing this travel on my own. And I thought that was safer to do it that way for me. But what it turned out to feel like it was one voice with just the one teacher with the body and the voice changing. They just started talking to me as teachers as I went along. And it felt like one conversation flowed into the other. And one woman in South Carolina said that her husband asked her, is she ready to put roots down when she moved there? And they had been there for about 4 years. And when she decided yes, all of a sudden she was able to build community. And with Cameron saying that she didn't wait for community to find her, don't wait, create. And as I was going along and flying home, I was still married at the time. I couldn't understand why my home didn't feel like home either. And I realized, it was what was going on in my relationship that made this beautiful home not feel like home. So what I found was home and connection really is about the people, the community, and it's something that I could create. It's not, my story doesn't define me. It's what I choose to believe connection is.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
so much of my life, I let my story define me and my past define me. And I realized I could put down roots. I could actually, even though I saw myself as someone that didn't have roots because of my beginnings, just this woman saying that her husband said, "Are you ready to put down roots?" And her telling me she did, and that changed everything. It's like, oh,
You
I
can,
can put down my own
you
roots.
can do this. Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't even explain. I mean, I get chills right now telling you this because going through your entire life, and going through all these projects as a kid where they say design your family tree and you kind of feel like you're faking it, to actually realize I could put down roots and they could feel real and I could feel solid and
Hmm.
based. That was life changing for me. The whole process.
That's a really powerful
Mm.
metaphor, isn't it? To put
Hmm.
down roots, to kind of bloom where you're, well, to choose to be planted and then to bloom where you're planted. Whatever's gone before, you can start now and start creating your own home, your own community.
Yeah. And our
Whatever.
minds, right? Our brains are designed that we look for what we believe, right? Our brains don't
Mhm.
necessarily know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined.
Mm,
So, I just see this as so powerful for, when you feel disconnected, and that's what you focus on, as I had for so much of my life, with the story I chose to believe about myself. uh I always say the story you tell yourself changes everything about yourself.
yeah.
And once I was able to change the story about
Mm.
myself, it didn't matter whether or not it was true or not, as far as where I have roots, or not. It was what I chose to believe, and that was a game changer. And it's honestly has changed everything for me, in the way I walk into a room, the way I sit up, believing
Yeah.
that I belong and I'm connected.
Mhm.
I can so get that. I heard a phrase, I think last week, that said, don't just listen to the narrative in your head. Don't just listen to yourself. Talk to yourself.
Mhm.
So,
Mm.
what are you going to tell yourself about yourself that sets you up for success? That challenges the narrative that's not serving you. So, don't just listen to yourself, talk to yourself. And that's what you're doing in telling yourself what your story is, rather than importing everything that's been given to you.
Yes, and that's so exciting because it's a power move that we can all do. It's just recognizing that we can do it. So
Yeah.
it's a game changer.
So, what would you say to, like, Gen, what letter are we up to? Gen Z, or
Yeah.
whoever comes after Gen Z, where the concern is that the generation is so anxious and so isolated and very good at technological connection, but not really good at human connection. What would you want to say to them about
Mm.
authentic connections?
Yeah, that's one thing AI cannot replace, right? It can't replace actual human connection. And I really think about the next generation, because our generation has done such a great job showing them how to disconnect, that we
Mm,
haven't shown them how to connect. And, this sharing meals, as I did across the US, that's been something that's been done since the dawn of time. Sharing
mm,
food with each other
Mm.
has meant, safety, survival, and belonging. And so for the next generation, even, I apologize to them for not being their role models, but it's coming on them now, that they need to actually go out there and connect. It could be harder because they didn't get practice in this as we did. I've spoken to people, I'm in my 50s. I've spoken to people my age, and they remember their parents inviting friends and neighbors over to their house regularly, or people
yeah.
coming over maybe after church, or whatever gathering it was, to their homes, and that was not an unusual thing.
Hmm.
My generation, it doesn't happen as much. Our kids haven't seen people just coming into our homes
Mm.
without any
Mm.
preparation and plan. And this next generation has it even more difficult because they have Instagram and all these social medias, where if you invite somebody to your home, it has to look like, it's been planned by a celebrity chef, right?
Yeah.
And an
Yeah. Yeah.
event
Yeah.
planner. So I would just tell the next generation, let it be easy. Let it be
Mm,
easy. And, what is the first easiest step you can do? And make a goal to connect at least once a week with someone. For somebody, it could be saying hello to someone at a grocery store. For another person, it will be inviting them to their house.
yeah,
mm.
yeah. And being intentional, because it definitely won't happen accidentally, will it? That's not the way we
No,
live
but we need
anymore.
to show them. We need to show them to make it easier. And I especially worry about the young men because, men as they get older and retire, there's a high level, historically, there's been a higher level of depression
Mm,
because as boys, they're playing sports, they're, activities bind their friendships. Then they go into the workplace and the workplace binds these male friendships and then retire and they don't necessarily have that. Well, this next generation, well, one, a lot of them went to school for a while virtually, but also now in the workplace, they're working virtually. So they're
Mhm.
not even establishing the basis of those, male conversations throughout their lifespan as they were historic in, generations past. So I really worry about the young men as they get older, if we don't show them how to connect.
yeah, that's so true.
Mm.
I'm becoming a worrying statistic about, the isolation and even mental health challenges that can lead on to suicide sometimes. And
Yeah.
that's a trend we absolutely need to reverse.
Mm.
What next for you, Sherry?
Well,
What was
I've got an insight into what's next, and I know certainly you have your upcoming memoir, Table for 51. So I want to
Well,
say, is that a play
that's
on what's
February.
happening with
That
the
came out in
51st?
February.
It's out in February. Okay, good. Okay,
It was. Yeah, we just
and that's not
re-released
about
it.
the
You can get
51st
it.
state, right?
No, but it's hilarious because I'm the 51st table. So that book title, Table for 51, how many people, I have to say in America have come and talked to me, educated people about how amazing it was to be in these, go on all these 51 states instead of 50 states.
Yeah.
One woman actually throughout a dinner party, she kept on talking about the 51 states. I didn't want to correct her. And at one point she said, I only have 4 states left. In my head, I was thinking, well, you might be closer than you think because we
Yeah,
have 50
exactly,
states
exactly.
well at the point of recording this? So
Absolutely.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
that's out. The memoir is out. So what next then? Back to Andrew's question. Then what next for you?
Well, I'm going to test all my theories because I'm going to move actually for the first time out of the state I was. Well, I wasn't born here, but I was raised here since a baby, Washington
Mm.
State on the West Coast, and I plan to move to another state because my divorce is finalized. My kids are in their 20s, and the cost of living on the coastal states it's really high. So there's
Uh-huh.
not necessarily a reason for me to be in this area. So I'm going to move and I'm going to start all over again. And I will be writing about it as I go along. But
Okay. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
my theories of how to make connection and build community I'm going to hit it in real time. So this next year will be a big year for me personally.
I think if you've cracked the code, this is the book that everybody needs now. How to learn all over again, how to be
Hmm.
human, how to connect, and
Make
how to
connection, build
build
community.
build community. I just had a question and it completely went out of my head. Oh, what's the work that you do in your coaching with, is it with women? Is it with anybody? What's the focus of your work?
So it started when I started out, I started working with women in part because I was married and I wanted to be, it just felt more comfortable. I'm a litigator by training. And then I was going along, I started to get more male clients. And now I've really dived into professional speaking. And so in my professional speaking realm, I'm speaking at conferences, associations, businesses. So my coaching now usually is with those business people and those
Right.
business leaders,
Gotcha.
but we also touch on
Mhm.
um, personal connections because if you can't be aligned in your business if you don't feel aligned at home.
True.
Mm.
Otherwise, I mean, that's your primary safety. If things are not feeling aligned and you don't feel connected at home, y- it doesn't matter what your business is doing. You're not gonna, your mind's not gonna be there.
I wish could you just say that one more time, because that's the message we try to preach using different language, that what happens
Yeah.
at home has a direct impact on your
Yeah,
performance.
your
But I
personal stories don't stay personal. They flow into your business. So you got to, it all, it's like that old thing, put your oxygen mask on first. But really,
Mhm.
I always think if before I get surgery or a surgery of some sort, I always want to ask the doctor, how's your home life going?
Uh-huh.
Because I know where your mind's going to be. So I need your home life to be good before you use that scalpel.
yeah, that's just such a good imagery. How hard and how deep are you going to be cutting based on what's going on
Yeah.
at home? I hear you. I hear you. So true.
So I was going to say, so people want to find out more about your stories. How do they connect with you? How do they get the book? Tell us a bit about that.
Well, the book, it's on Amazon and other,
Mhm.
other online platforms or in stores, but most likely Amazon's the
Mhm.
best place to start, Barnes and Noble. And
And
my
that's table for
website,
51, right?
Table for
No.
51.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yep, Table for 51. My website is an imperfectly perfect life.com.
Mhm.
Or they could just Google my name, Shari Leid. Like I said, I'm an open book, so I'll pop up everywhere, and I
Yeah.
answer emails, messages.
Yeah. Well, we can put the links in the show notes as well. That'll help
Perfect.
people find you. No, great. It's been a great conversation. As we leave, though, I'm just conscious of time here now. As we leave, any final thoughts that you want to leave people with? And it could be on any of the particular areas. Any message that you haven't yet had a chance to communicate? You want to say, guys, you need to do this or listen to this.
I think just make the first move. Make the first move. Ask somebody, to meet for coffee or just to take a walk. But make the first move. You'll be surprised how receptive people are to connect.
Yeah. That's a
And
really
reconnect.
powerful, that's
Mhm.
a really
Mhm.
powerful message in a world where we think everybody is so independent and isolated and not wanting to connect. I think even your very friends want to connect with us as well.
I know. They must have noticed just about over. There's and by the way, they are not just Labradors, they're English Labradors.
Okay, all right.
Welcome to the party then.
Yeah.
Sound like big dogs, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, listen, thank you so much for making the time. Really enjoyed our conversation, and it resonates on so many levels. The work you're doing around connection couldn't be more important than for such a time as this. So we wish you all the very best. And as John knows, I'm going to go check out your book as well.
Well,
For
thank
sure.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for making sure that relationships don't just stay good, that they get great.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
work we need to put in to keep them there. Yeah, awesome.
Well, to our audience around the world, thanks for being with us yet again. Lots of great stuff in here about connecting, belonging, so many things we can all take away from this. So thank you, Shari, and thanks for being with us, and see you all again next time.
Next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the 4 Habits podcast. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, take our free relationship skills quiz at the4habits.com/skills quiz to start improving your relationships today. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time.